for today is how can RRI enter the world? A beguilingly simple question. And as you've heard from the 4 different projects, there are many quite narrow ideas of how we answer that. And this is meant to give us an opportunity to think and to approach it from a chaotic or from an unstructured and creative angle. I want to give you a definition of chaos, which is chaos theory is one of the principles underlying this process. Chaos is the dissolution of old forms before new structures or ideas can form. So the old forms would normally be an agenda, a speaker, and quite a tight little process with an outcome at the end. The rules of open space are quite different. There's no known output. The only output that's going to happen is the one that comes out of your energy and your participation and your commitment, whatever you choose to put in. So what is different about open space? It is, we try and have people not being in their previous boxes, policymakers or lawyers or whatever, and you have to be more like random elements of uncontrolled, environment-free, thinking human beings. So regard yourselves as free radicals and be prepared to get out of the box for the next hour. Now the process of open space has got 4 different sections. The first one is a welcome, which is just about over. The next one is agenda setting. As you can see, we have no agenda whatsoever. And as the remainder of the process, the agenda is set by yourselves. The agenda comes from somebody who has a thought and would like to share that thought and will then help create an agenda. So I'll come back to how we set the agenda in a moment. But when the agenda has been set, and we hope between 5 or 7 people are prepared to stand up and lead an idea or a process or a thought around which discussions will take place in the open session. So after the agenda setting, we have what we call open space. Now open space is a concept that was devised by a guy called Harrison Owen about 20 years ago, and he famously said there's only one rule in open space. And I wonder if, Rob, if you could just tip over that chart over there, which is high, but behind that one. The only rule of open space technology is that one there. It's actually a law. It's called the law of 2 feet. So you have to, your 2 feet will guide you inevitably and unerringly towards where your energy feels the most attractive. So that is the only law. There are some quite New Age type principles which go with that, which say that the agenda that you put on today will be the correct agenda. There's no judgment of that. The people that are here today are the right people. We don't need someone else from outside to assist us. It starts in its own mysterious way, and when you have reached some form of conclusion, that will be it. Those are the principles. And we'll have about an hour to gather under the heading of 1 or 5 or 7 individuals, and you will move around like free radicals and join the conversation that you feel comfortable with. And let's try and approach it in a light and fun-ful manner. That is the idea. At the end of the open space, we'll come back here again, and we will just share. It's a closing session, and those groups that have been brave enough to stand up and help set the agenda will then just share what those groups have got. What we're hoping to get from each group is some or other formulation or idea or angle or thoughts which can be shared in 1 or 2 sentences. We're not looking for reams and reams of bullet points. We're looking for something which is conclusive of that group, which the group agrees with, and you can come back and share with us, which will in due course go to the Progress website and the newsletter and will be further disseminated. And who knows, it might actually change the course of RRI in the future. So we have no idea what the outcome might be, and we will see in about an hour's time. Before we go ahead to agenda setting, could I just ask if there are any questions on the process? I do have 4 facilitators or co-facilitators, And our job is actually to become invisible and stay invisible. But they'll be filtering around in their invisible way, and you can ask them any questions of process. So it's Francesca over there, there's Doris, there's Michael, where's Michael? And there's Bernd, and Michael over here. So these are your invisible facilitators. And as soon as you've set the agenda and you start voting with your feet, we disappear completely, and we trust in the mysterious forces of chaos. So may I ask you to please consider again the question of our session, which was how can RRI enter the real
Responsible
world?
research and innovation is a new framework that has been developed
Let me
by
ask whether any of you
in order to make research and innovation.
Let me ask you just to sit and think for
What's
2 or 3
important
minutes.
stuff
And the facilitator will help anybody who's prepared to lead the discussion. So we're looking for someone, anybody who's prepared to lead a discussion, have an idea around the question, how can RRI enter the world? So may I ask you to think, feel whether you want to be a leader or a follower, and I strongly hope and encourage that some of you will feel inclined to float an idea and have it written down so that we can have that as one of the ideas, agenda items. So please think deeply, and those who are prepared to do something, reach for a facilitator and write something down on a bit of paper. Is that clear enough? Or just sit and do absolutely nothing. That's also fine. Sure. Sorry. There's a flip chart. You can just tear some off. Those flip charts there. Yeah. Tim?
Well, I'm not prepared to be a discussion leader, but I just want to say congratulations. What you just said really made me excited about this session. I hope we can deliver on the promise of the introduction. But immediately what came to mind this morning when you told me about the title of the session is how can RRI enter the real world? I noticed that you dropped the real when you were speaking.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Doris. When you were speaking, is it deliberate that you dropped the word real? No. Okay, so the real is still there.
The real word is very important.
Okay, that's exactly the point I would like to speak about next quickly. I thought that maybe sometime during the exchanges we can have some kind of coming together on what we understand by real world and enter. For example, in my work in the Philippines with indigenous peoples and the urban poor, I have learned that many of the things that they do, the research that they do, are always responsible. In other words, it is not ESC that will introduce being responsible and being inclusive, because these communities, highly marginalized communities, have been doing responsible, inclusive work. So I just would like to have some clarity on this.
Thank you very much. I think the clarity will come from yourselves and from you, Tim. I cannot see how you can avoid being one of the leaders. Having said that, may I suggest that you simply write down the question, what is the real world? And actually, and we already have our first agenda item, because that's a very important question, and you can further your discussions around it. We don't want to have too much debate around this room. We simply want agenda points. That's a useful one. Any other angles, please start thinking them out, and it'll be useful for us. We've lost quite a lot of time. If those of you who are prepared to float an idea, which might gather some useful discussion, if you come up and write on a separate bit of paper with the facilitator another idea. So thank you for that one, Tim. You are in. And while you're all thinking about it, what will then happen as the process goes on? Tim will then get that's idea number one. She will take that bit of paper, or she will go off, and you'll follow her diminutive form, and you'll sit around her, and you'll have a discussion.
Roger?
Yeah.
Hi, Nick from the UK. I want to pose the question that if part of our RRI, or the question of translating it into the real world, is about the democratization of research. Is there a prior step? Do we have to think about how we might properly democratize society so that people are ready?
Yeah. May I propose that could be stated simply as, is democratization a key part of RRI? That's simple.
Democratization of research.
Democratization of research.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is, that's, I think we can accept that. The answer is yes. Is civil society sufficiently democratized to afford all citizens the opportunity to capitalize on a democratized research?
Okay, can I suggest, we don't want a long agenda item, we've got to synthesize it. If we can simply
Do we
say
first need to democratize
democratization, questions around democratization of research really is what point number 2 is, I think. And you can develop ideas around that one. So thanks very much. Mick is point number 2, idea number 2. Thank you very much. I have you, and then... Sorry, am I missing someone behind? Okay, would you like to go first? Sure. Okay, thank you.
So I'm interested about the dissemination about the RRI ID and about the use of social networks and art to disseminate this ID.
So how can we simplify that?
So social networks and art for RRI dissemination.
Social networks and art.
If we link it to our question, we can say, are social networks a way to enter the real world?
And art.
Social networks and art. Okay. Can we get your name so we can... Clemente. Okay, let's just get okay, great.
I'm very interested in RRI from an industry perspective, so I'd like to pose the agenda item about whether or not some sort of industry standard could be applicable for RRI, and if so, what that might look like and how it could work.
Okay. So you've got 17 there.
Did you say that again?
Just put, I guess, industry standards in RRI or something. RRI is an industry standard, something like that.
Okay, let's just slow down a second. Thank you so much. Let's get that. Let's get it right. Industry standards. Catherine. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we've got 4 great topics.
My question, my agenda item is to do with growth. How can we have RRI and still have growth? Are they not mutually
Good. Okay.
compatible?
How would you like to frame it? RRI and growth
Are they
mutually incompatible.
What kind of growth?
any growth?
Economic growth.
Economic growth.
Income, yeah?
growth.
Or is that a question to discuss in this?
Maybe it's a question to discuss, but let's just say growth and then you can work around it. Lovely question.
It's a very broad question. How is it related to our topic? But never mind.
I think it's a question, if people vote, you have to obviously try and frame your thinking, your discussion, in order to slot in with the topic. So it should be guiding us in our thinking as to how RRI enters the real world, not just the world. Okay, we have 5 good topics. Let's get your name, please. Sarah.
SAI.
Okay, is anyone else burning with another topic? This could be a moment of fame. Yeah. This could be it. You just squeaked in.
I just had one yesterday, so it would be the second.
That's you.
So it might be related to Clementine's topic, but I'll try it anyway and see how you will respond. How can we leave the paradigm of dissemination and connect to the mindsets and perspectives of those that should act responsible in the future?
And how do you simplify that question? I'm thinking it slow. How do you
Leave traditional dissemination behind and connect better with the real world?
Yeah, it's about connecting with the mindsets and perspectives of researchers and innovators. So it's about, I work in the RRI Tools project, for probably familiar, and that's a question that we get often is how to explain it to other people, how to
Education.
maybe but it's not education, because education, I would say, is not the answer. So it's a bridge. It's kind of connecting But I mean, yeah, I don't have the answer yet. So
as long as people are interested in you in that discussion, can find their way to you. So it must just be clear enough so that people understand it, so they can connect. So we'll read them all out in a moment, and get your name as well, please. Okay, unless there's someone else burning to be famous or to be a leader, we're going to stop there now. I think let's just read them through again, and then just agree how we're going to do it and what our time frames are. We started a bit late, so we're going to be slightly constrained. First of all, group 1 with Tim. What does the real world mean? And?
What does enter mean?
And enter. And enter, okay. In other words, linking that to our question. Number 2, and so group 1, do you want to say where you're going to go, Tim? Just so that you will just sit right there. People will come to you, okay? Idea number 2 is democratization of research, part of RRI. That is Mick. Okay, yeah, Mick's doing that one. Mick, will you move away from Tim slightly and form group number 2? Okay. 3 are social networks. Please read that.
Art.
And stroke art. A way for RRI to enter the real world, and that's Clementine. Group 3, and when you stay right there for a while. And once you've got your group, you can then just go where you're comfortable. You might have 2 people. If you have no people coming, then your 2 feet must just take you to someone else. That's how it should work. Okay. Number 4, industry standards with Catherine. Issues around industry standards. Okay.
Whether they are a way of entering the real world.
Yeah. You could frame. Do you want to frame that more? Our industry standards is the way forward.
Yeah. And if so, what might they look like?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, industry standards will go to Catherine, that's group number 4 over there. Number 5, are RRI and economic growth compatible? That's a nice political question. Sarah, number 5, do you want to say where you're going to be? Or why don't you just go that way? You're definitely far left of the spectrum. Yeah. And number 6, last one, how can we have dissemination?
Leave dissemination behind and reach mindsets of researchers and innovators.
Okay, and that is Frank at the back there. Number 6. I'd like you to all start thinking as free radicals, start intuiting which way your feet wish to take you. And when you get to your chosen destination, sit down, make yourself comfortable. Don't chat too much about this and that, because we've got a limited time, and when the time is up, it's over. So we would love you to come back with something. So it's all about self-organization. So we're not going to tell you how to organize yourselves. We're hoping that you'll miraculously self-organize and come back here 15 minutes before the end. Can someone just assist me what time we stop here? 3:15, 4:45, 4:45. Okay, but I'd like to just get it in my mind. It's 4:45 now. We started 2:45. Okay, 3:15, I believe we should be back here, 3:15, and we'll have a closing where the different groups just announce, and we'll record it later. And if you can write down your answers, that will help us a lot. Okay. Are there any further questions? Because I think we're now ready to ramble off.
I have one question.
Yes.
Are we allowed to move around, or do we stay in the one?
Law of 2 feet. You must move until your feet feel they've found their chosen place. That's the idea. And no one needs to feel bad. If you walk away from someone, it's not an insult. It's just obeying the law. Okay. All right. Any more questions? Can we go ahead? There should be some command for open space. Off you go or something. But, sorry? Pull around. Okay, guys. So now it's not a competition. So I don't want people to air punch and sort of prove how great the groups were. That's not really the idea. We can just have a short 2-minute summary from each of the groups, which will try and summarize what the group said, and any quick questions for clarity, and then we'll move on. And then hopefully we can take away the results of the discussions. And some of them might feed on into a different version in our open space tomorrow, or not. But at the end of this, we will have something, and I can see we've already got something really useful. So let's ask each group to kick off. I think the first one, group number 1, Tim, are you going to give us? There you go.
Thanks, Roger. 2 minutes. Michael will help me. No time to introduce the members of this brilliant group of ours. But anyway, I'll try my best to relate to you essentials of what we discussed. I might be committing some errors at some points. I'm sorry about that. Question was, what do we mean by enter? And what do we mean by the real world? And the discussions somehow produced the following ideas. We said, put somebody from the real world into research. That's one way of entering the real world, RRI, entering the real world. And what do we mean by that? Michael, I think you should take over.
Yeah, we said that, and I have to say that we had with us, fortunately we had Henny and Mario from the Sun People with us, and this had a big impact, good impact in our discussion. So we stated what we knew from the Progress project, that we know that mostly, unfortunately, researchers come into the real world of end users and especially vulnerable communities. They enter the world without being asked. And then the idea of our session was to turn the thing around and say the vulnerable communities and end users, they should enter the world of the researchers and being part of this research and innovation process. And this turns the thing around, and this could be, as we agreed in our session, this could be one solution, or at least an approach to be discussed as a solution. We discovered that, and this was somehow new to me, if we talk about the real world, we don't talk only about the real world today, it's also the real world that expects us tomorrow, and also we have to think of the real world yesterday and in the past. We also talked about important stakeholders that are part of the real world and that are often affected by irresponsible research. Not only end users, but also any citizen. And we talked also about the importance that these stakeholders have in shaping the research and innovation process to make it more ethical and more sustainable. So there's an important, I'm running out of time, don't I? There's an important role that educators can play here, and this is why Tim also introduced some concept at her university, where the university plays an important role in educating and training future researchers in ethics and sustainability and societal demands. Policy also is very important, we all know that, and this leads somehow to the next question, to the next group, which is the part of the industry. And I think I should close with that.
No, don't.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I have 30 seconds. We thought also that one way to disseminate, popularize RRI is for researchers to be conscious that they carry with them, they embody within them the RRI. So in terms of the one way to disseminate, popularize is researchers themselves behaving as responsible, inclusive researchers. That's one way. And to make people being researched also researchers. I mean, not just passive or sources of data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done. We shouldn't actually judge, I suppose, and say well done, or can we say well done? Is that okay?
No.
I think Well done, guys.
But actually they will, I'm sure what we said will provoke many questions. That is the best. That is the medal for excellence. It provokes lots of questions.
Okay, well, we'll leave that at the end. Thank you very much for that. Let us have the mixed group now, please. Let's stick it up here. Oh, you got a sticker?
Yeah. I won't read it all out.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily going to read all of it.
Summarize if you can.
In summary, we're speaking a lot about deliberative democracy and whether it's, for instance, a better form of democracy than just voting for stuff, especially if you're only voting for stuff from time to time. And we, I think, felt that forms of deliberation were more in tune with the principles of RRI. That said, we were an example of deliberative democracy in practice in that we didn't settle out any really pristine answers to the question, which was, do we need a more authentically democratic society to start with to make the most of any principles that are around responsible research? And to that extent, we had differences of opinion, as you would expect, in the group. And some of those were, not particularly fatal differences of opinion. I think if we'd have had more time, which deliberation demands, we might have got to more finessed answers. But if I can try and that's not Freudian, if I can try and scan where our discussions went, we had sort of one school of thought, and just to let you know, I was in this one, that sort of asks, well, if RRI is about aligning science to social needs, what we need to be concerned about is democratic solutions to social needs that are probably cooperative and in some sense are right from the get-go antithetical to the sort of competitively organised societies that we live in, so that the answer to the first question is yes, we must change society if we're going to capitalise on the potential for people to participate in research. That said, there was a view that, and again I agree with this on the whole, that even living in a neoliberal society, loads of really good responsible research does happen that does really genuinely, cooperatively and inclusively involve end users in the processes and decision making. So one way to change society, and I think Bjorn said this, was it's a sort of guerrilla subversive act by which the really good democratic processes that are in RRI can be extended out into communities. And Barbara, wherever she is, spoke about hybrid spaces that bring together different forms of social actors, business, citizenry, maybe social movements, that do exist. They exist beyond the scientific community, and they might exist within the scientific community, and both could sort of nurture each other. Am I getting that right, Barbara? There's probably much more to it than this. And then, a little bit contrary to that was the idea, well, what do we do with the sort of individual innovators who are inventors and who want to sort of work away on their own project in a way that might be a little bit in tension with a more cooperative ethos. And that in any event, even if that doesn't bother us, the standard model of sort of research funding in some sense favours the separate inventive individual or corporation that wants to sort of keep an idea to itself, commercially exploit it, etc., etc. Now, I hope I'm not putting words in people's mouths, but I think therein lies some of the contradiction. There's also a lot of discussion about, would you use deliberation in all possible circumstances? And you clearly wouldn't. But for democratic purposes, maybe it's a better form than what we have. And one of the ideas was, well, if you were in the business of at least slowly changing society so it was more democratic, we've got lots and lots of ideas around democratic pedagogy that we could do more than rhetorical lip service to, try them out in schools. the contrary position is that I know in the UK, most curriculum reform is travelling with light speed in completely the opposite direction, and the commercialisation of universities is part of that. So without getting too depressed, we think it's a great idea, but you lot better put more energy into it or it'll never happen.
Thank you very much. Mick's team. Can I just say that result, it's quite a challenge for open space because it's a very complex subject and you've got 3 different debates, and if one really did justice to open space more, you'd have it longer and then you'd try and synthesize something. It might very well be that tomorrow's open space, which is a different question, but not that different, it might be possible to try and get out of that some more synthesis so that you have something of a more soundbitey idea rather than a repeat of the debates.
Yes.
But these debates are important in order to get to the point. So thank you very much for that. We're going to have to just keep on speeding up. So can we have the next group, which was Clementine's group, please? And again, try and give us a summary if possible. Okay. Top one.
Yeah, there was only one. There was only one.
Okay, good.
This is the summary.
Good.
So I'm Clémentine, and I'm a scientist, and in Paris at least we don't know enough about RRI, so we worked on how to do the marketing about RRI, how to make it more famous. And the first thing for us was to have a good place where to find interesting information and good tools to apply RRI, and we think that it's what's being done by RRI tools. So hopefully this part will be done. We don't have to do that part. And then to have this RRI tools being very famous, not only in this community, but with scientists and for industrials and everyone. And so this is the dissemination part. And for this, we think that for dissemination, we need both ambassadors, so people who are thought leaders, like journalists, people like, for example, radio journalists that are very famous in your country. And we should use them, but we should also use artists, and so that they do a very fun and very short movie about what is RRI. And we thought that it might be risky, that it would be more fun to do what is not RRI and showing bad example and saying no, like something like that. And then we could circulate this this movie, hoping that it's so funny that it will spread like a virus on the social networks. So this is the second, two phases of the dissemination. First the ambassadors, and second the art and social networks. And they mentioned also the Spark, which is more about events and a lot of different
exhibition. Yeah, sorry, but it's just a Sparks project brings together art and science, and we are developing an exhibition that will be cloned and will be in the whole Europe during 3 years, or on the coming 3 years, and that's also a way of bringing this gap together, arts and dissemination and RRI.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's very punchy and very powerful and very useful. Thank you so much. Next group, Catherine. Let's keep an eye on numbers there. We're now back to form. We're keeping one.
So our question was about industry standards and whether that could do anything to get industry more interested in RRI. And basically the conclusion that my group came up with, who are also brilliant people, was that they would be good if they provide value to companies, but but they're not the be-all and end-all. And then we had a huge discussion about other things that we could do to get industry implementing RRI. And some of the discussions were that actually they already do a lot of this stuff, but they need a bit of support from us through tools and workshops and things like that, and getting our expertise into them. But for those who aren't already implementing it, things like some incentives could be helpful. So things like the procurement process for European procurement or your local national procurement could be helpful. Like illustrating positive and negative case studies. So we talked a lot about Volkswagen and their very distinct lack of RRI recently, and how that could actually be a really good case study for irresponsible innovation. And also things like using scenarios if they're very small companies and they can't necessarily get out to include stakeholders, they could at least think about scenarios that are outside their sort of standard thing. We also looked at some different, we also talked about the fact that different companies have different needs, and so different tools need to be appropriate for those companies. But also the main thing that we came out with at the end of all this was that it needs to be kind of integrated across the whole business culture. So from education, there's some MBAs and things don't really teach much about ethics or any sort of responsibility. So I think certainly at those sorts of levels, we would hope that RRI could actually have some leverage into the mindset of business leaders. That's it. Thank you.
It's always interesting, sometimes some very clever people write really badly. You can't actually read what they say. but when you hear it, you get the answer. So anyway, I shouldn't say no judgment. Group number 5, I think it was Sarah. You're going to have to wait for a moment of fame, right? Just one more. Some people really want to get famous. Oh, this one. For the copy.
Okay, so we're in the corner here. So, just would it be easier to put it in the middle, I think?
Put it forward a bit. Don't want to be the last.
Okay.
Talking to the microphone, sorry.
Okay, so we were talking about growth and sustainability and all that sort of thing with regards to is growth really a feasible aim goal within industry in general. We found that there was quite a lot of different tensions, like things like profit and growth and environment. Temporality, which is the timing of product release and things like that. And how do we actually think about transparency when we need that in RRI? And then and companies are worried about things like trade secrets and stuff like that. So a lot of organisations will see actually RRI as being a constraint, and we say, well, actually, is it really a constraint? And so what we thought was, okay, I mean, I hope I'm not misrepresenting anything that was said. I don't think that I am. So we thought about some solutions. A carrot, not a stick. Quite often we talk about things like regulation and standards and rule-bound ways and approaches of getting people to behave in the way you want them to behave. So the idea that was, okay, how about tax breaks? How about incentives for organisations so that they actually think, we can benefit from actually incorporating RRI into the way that we work. So that was one of the things that we were thinking about. What also we were thinking about in quite a big way was the whole contextual situation with regards to implementation of RRI. We had a very interesting comments, thank you, about India in particular, and about the design need for growth and the difference of inequalities and things like that, which caused quite a lot of problems for the area. And how do you actually incentivise organisations to operate RRI when the most important things are think about sustainability and the future of populations, and how do we actually get people at the really at the bottom of the ladder to have things like health and education and just the standard things that the Western world actually takes for granted. So that means that RRI implementation it could be seen very much as a top-down implement, something like being forced upon people or forced upon industry. That's not exactly the way to go. We don't want the Europe telling everywhere else that what they've got to do and how they've got to behave. So So that actually RRI does have to be dealt with differently in different contexts, in different countries, and for example, India versus the USA, there will be very, very different approaches to implementing RRI. But we've got this little statement here at the bottom, I'll read out directly to you. It can RRI make us rethink the need, inverted commas, for growth? Do we really need growth? Is what we actually need more like sustainability, or the idea of maintaining a healthy profit, and that actually the cultural change that we would like to see promoted with RRI could actually remove that desire to continually grow, and that is one of the things that we were mainly talking about. Oh, and the whole power base thing that is one of the problems of corporates. I think I've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A good example of how a good discussion can end up with a question, which really summarizes your discussion. And thank you very much for that. And your moment of fame has arrived. So please come forward. Please give a hand of applause. Give a round of applause.
That was my intention, of course. So we just started with the first group, first discussion.
So which way will we go? This one?
Yeah, it's landscape.
Okay. You guys are really
So our question was about how can we connect to people in the real world that we want to take along in this whole RRI movement. That's not a movement. So therefore we had to answer your question first. What is real and what is entering? So we quickly discovered that real is something else. It has to do with what you're looking at, the target group, so to speak. So for me, real, as a member of the RRI community, real is researchers, innovators. For researchers, real is not themselves, but maybe stakeholder groups, communities, patients, etc. So we discovered that RRI ideally should be embedded in all those layers and corners of the real world. And then how to enter it, we rephrased that actually to starting from the real world. So we talked about how do you start talking to people, how do you get people to engage, to collaborate. You have to fulfill their need first before you can move on fulfilling your need or talking about what you want to offer them or how you want to change them to becoming members of the RRI community. So having started from the real world, we said it's all about discovering it yourself. So don't try to convince people or push a certain cognitive frame of what RRI is and what the benefits of RRI are, but invite people to come along and discover what they, discover what RRI is for themselves from their perspective in their context. So that means that after some initial support, some organization, you should actually open up the space, to what they want to do, what they have to offer. And that means what we quickly said we have to break down silos, and then we got really enthusiastic about the word silos. We talked about ivory towers and other ways of isolation. But we also recognize that isolation is important sometimes, if you, for example, as in specialization. So we said the metaphor that we ended up with is we are all still on islands, but we have to make sure that there are different, not bridges, because bridges is only one way of trafficking and bridges can be controlled. So you should also be allowed to swim, to take the boat, or have any other way to hop from one island to the other. And then we've entered the real world. That's it.
I must say, I was really excited about trying to work out what was somebody thinking when they put those dots there. So those are clearly the islands, and sharks in between, and people swimming from island to island. Anyway, so it's very creative. I think the energy has been wonderful. It would have been really nice to have had a bit longer to tie up some of the energy and bring it to more digestible form, but I'm not really judging it. I'm just sort of observing that it was quite rushed. I hope some of you have got ideas that are brewing and teams that are growing, actually, will consider coming tomorrow and converting your questions into different forms to answer a different question tomorrow, just because it can be very useful. Surprisingly, it can be really useful what comes out of these sessions. We're going to devour, actually digest all of these and see what we can take from them. And I hope we'll see some of you tomorrow afternoon at Open Space. May I just ask my facilitators if any points anyone would like to make, or any comments before we disperse back into T-Space of Open Space. May we all be excused. Thank you for your energy and for your assistance. Thank you very much.